The morning hush in Pinehurst Valley was a fragile thing, the kind of quiet you only get after the frost has just lifted and before the world decides to stir. But that silence shattered abruptly, first, by the crackle of a radio. "We've found something." The voice was terse, cracking through static on the handheld device like a bolt of urgency through still air. Captain Reynolds gripped the receiver tighter, motioning to the others in his team. The search had already stretched longer than any of them wanted to admit, and with a storm inching closer over the peaks, time was losing its patience. Dawn had only just begun to filter through the dense Colorado pine woods when they stumbled into a clearing, small, moss-carpeted, almost too ordinary. But what lay at its center was anything but a German shepherd, lying low to the ground, bloodied, still, not dead. Its fur was matted with dried blood, smeared with forest dirt. One eye was missing entirely, a scarred, hollow space where vision used to be. The remaining eye, amber like polished stone, burned with feral alertness. The dog wasn't lying down to rest. It was lying down to guard, curled around something small, something human. Reynolds raised a hand for caution, approaching slowly. The closer they got, the clearer it became. This animal, whatever its story, was in a battle between instinct and training, pain and purpose. Its ribs heaved with fatigue, yet still it growled, a low guttural sound. Protective. Defiant. "Easy now," Reynolds said softly, voice lowered as he took another step forward. That's when they saw it. A child's hand. Pale. Still. Peeking out from beneath the German shepherd's curled frame. No movement. No sound. "Dear God," one of the rescuers whispered. "It's the Wilson boy." The air thickened. No one spoke. The only sounds were the rasping breath of the wounded dog, and the wind beginning to churn through the trees. They had found the boy, but not in the way anyone had expected, because what they were looking at wasn't just a case of a child lost in the woods. This was something else, something deeper. A question no one dared ask aloud. Who was this dog? And why had he chosen to save a boy he didn't know? What unfolded over the next hours would grip the entire town, would split opinions and challenge protocol, would draw government agents and uncover secrets thought buried halfway around the world. And at the center of it all, this one-eyed dog who had emerged from nowhere, carrying a lost child's life on his back and a story no one was ready for. But for now, in that frozen moment under the weight of storm-dark skies, all they knew was this: a boy was alive, and the reason was lying at his side, growling, bleeding, guarding Shadow. They wouldn't know his name until much later, wouldn't understand the full arc of his journey for days, weeks, months. But what they did understand, even then, was that this animal had not wandered into that forest by accident. He had a mission, and somehow, it had led him here, to Ethan, to a moment that would change everything, forever. He hadn't always been a ghost drifting through the edges of town. There was a time when Shadow's name was spoken with respect, quiet, crisp, and with a nod reserved for those who knew what he was. A time when his coat gleamed under desert, suns not clouded skies, when commands came in sharp bursts and every mission had a clear purpose: protect, detect, return. That time was long gone. Now he was just a stray, 7 years old. Too old for most shelters to bother with, too strong-looking for strangers to risk a second glance, too silent for children to feel safe approaching, and too broken for anyone to see what he still carried inside. Shadow had arrived in Pinehurst 3 months earlier, slipping through the backcountry unnoticed, a shadow in every sense. He avoided daylight, slept in dry culverts, ate from dumpsters when he could, scraps and bones when he couldn't. To most, he was just another wild dog. But Dr. Sarah Thompson knew better. She'd seen him once, late one evening when she was locking up the clinic. A glimpse through the shadows, a large shepherd, black and tan, his gait too clean to be feral, one eye missing, but the way he moved, it was too precise, too purposeful. She hadn't said anything. Not then. Just watched. Not all animals want to be rescued. Sarah had learned that the hard way. At the same time, on the other side of town, 5-year-old Ethan Wilson was collecting acorns in a canvas bag that his father had given him during their last camping trip. It was a quiet Saturday in October, the kind that wrapped the town in pumpkin spice and hay bale cheer. The Autumn Harvest Festival was in full swing. Ethan darted between booths, begging for caramel apples and marveling at homemade scarecrows. To a passerby, it looked like joy. To Melissa Wilson, his mother, it felt like fragile normalcy. She hadn't smiled like this in months, not since the divorce, not since James had moved out, not since everything fell apart and holding it all together meant running on caffeine and autopilot. Melissa worked full-time at the Pinehurst Animal Rescue. As a veterinarian, her days were filled with treating cats hit by cars, abandoned puppies, the occasional raccoon with a jar stuck on its head. Her nights were Ethan, homework, reheated dinners, and exhaustion. But today she had promised him time, just the two of them, at least until the call came in. "I'm so sorry to interrupt your day off," the shelter volunteer Amy said breathlessly. "But that shepherd mix we admitted yesterday, he started seizing. Dr. Thompson's out of town until tonight." Melissa's stomach dropped. She looked at Ethan. He was already frowning, recognizing the shift. The moment when his mom stopped being mom and became someone else. Responsible, apologetic, halfway gone. "I have to go," she said, kneeling beside him. "Just for a little while. Mrs. Bennett is right over there. You'll be with Katie and her mom. I'll come back, I promise." Ethan nodded. The way kids nod when they've learned that promises don't always come true. 30 minutes later, the emergency was stabilized. Melissa reached for her phone, texting Linda Bennett. "To check in," the reply came fast. "I thought he was with you." Melissa stared at the screen. "Katie said he went to find you 10 minutes ago. Last seen near the edge of the festival. That was where the grass turned wild, where trimmed lawns gave way to tangled roots and whispering trees, where wilderness didn't care about asthma or direction or fear. Shadow had seen the boy. He'd been watching from the tree line, waiting for the humans to leave their food unattended. The noise and color of the festival had kept him further back than usual. But then a butterfly, orange and bold, fluttered past him, and the boy followed, not out of recklessness, out of boredom, out of loneliness, out of the quiet ache of being left again. He followed one butterfly, then another, deeper and deeper, until the voices faded behind him, until the only sound was the wind. Shadow had been trained to observe. His one eye tracked the boy's movement, the irregular steps, the way. He began to slow, confused, his breath shortening. Shadow's instincts stirred. Children were unpredictable, but this one, he looked like someone Shadow used to know. Small, fragile, determined, and when the boy collapsed, gasping, his inhaler tumbling into the underbrush, Shadow moved, quiet, controlled, trained. He sniffed out the device, retrieved it gently in his jaws. He placed it beside the boy, and waited. It was the first time in 3 years he had approached a human on purpose. Ethan's breathing eased after a few desperate puffs. The storm had arrived. Rain slashed sideways, through the trees. Thunder cracked. Ethan curled beneath a tree, shivering, soaked. Shadow hovered near. He could have left, should have left. But something rooted him in place. A memory. A voice. "Find them, Shadow. Bring them home." So he lay beside the boy, pressed his body against Ethan's, offered his warmth, what little he had. And when the boy whispered, "Good dog," through chattering teeth, Shadow closed his eye and stayed. The mission had changed, but the command was the same: protect. The thing about children is they never mean to get lost. They don't set out to disappear. They follow things, simple things, a butterfly, a breeze, a fleeting thought. Ethan hadn't wanted to run. He only wanted to find his mom. After Melissa left him with Mrs. Bennett, he'd tried to blend in, but Katie had her friends, her games, her laughter, and Ethan, standing small and quiet by the cider stand, felt the ache of being invisible. That's when he saw it. A monarch butterfly. Its orange wings flickered like fire in the sunlight, moving just beyond the last vendor tent. Then another appeared. And another. Ethan clutched the small canvas bag slung over his shoulder, the one with acorns and pressed leaves from earlier, and stepped past the edge of the festival. Just a few steps, just a minute, just long enough for the wind to shift, for the voices behind him to blur into background noise, for direction to dissolve into wilderness. And then he was alone. In the forest, everything changed. The colors were darker, the sounds unfamiliar. Trees rose like silent sentinels, watching with bark-covered faces. Ethan stopped, turned around, and realized the festival was gone. "Mom?" he called out, voice thin, more breath than sound. Nothing answered except the rustle of leaves. He turned. Again, chose a direction at random, walked faster, then slower, then ran. It was only when the storm rolled over the mountain that panic truly arrived. The first cold droplet struck through the canopy. The wind carried a scent he didn't recognize. His breath caught. He reached for his inhaler. His foot caught. On a root. He fell hard. The inhaler flew from his hand, disappearing into the brush. And just like that, the forest became a trap. Shadow had watched it all unfold. He had positioned himself near the creek earlier that day, resting in a patch of dry leaves. The scent of festival food had tugged at his hunger, but the crowds kept him distant. But then the boy had wandered into his view, and something in the way he walked, the stiffness, the shortness of breath, the rising panic, sent signals through, Shadow's memory like an alarm. His body tensed, his ears perked. Every part of his training stirred to life. This child wasn't just alone, he was vulnerable. When Ethan fell, Shadow moved. The boy didn't notice him at first, not until the massive dog emerged from the underbrush, one eye glowing gold in the dim light. Ethan froze. Fear overtook his breathing. He backed against a tree. Shadow paused, calculated, evaluated. Then, nose to the ground, he began searching. The child watched as the dog sniffed through ferns and roots. And then, gently, Shadow picked something up in his jaws. The inhaler. He placed it at Ethan's feet. For a moment, boy and dog just stared at each other. Then Ethan reached 2 quick puffs. A gasp. Then, relief. The storm, meanwhile, was growing savage. Thunder boomed above them. Shadow flinched but didn't leave. Instead, he backed up slightly, gesturing, if a dog could gesture, with a tilt of his head. He moved toward a thicket, then stopped, looked back. Ethan didn't understand. But he followed. Together, they moved. Shadow guided Ethan to a fallen oak, massive, rotting, but hollow underneath. It created a crude shelter, dry enough to block the worst of the rain. Ethan crawled inside first, teeth chattering. Shadow followed, curling beside him. At first, the boy was stiff, scared. But warmth, real, physical warmth, changed that. Shadow's thick fur pressed against him like a living blanket. The heat radiated through Ethan's soaked clothes, slow but steady. The dog's heartbeat, heavy and calm, steadied the boy's racing fear. "Good dog," Ethan whispered. Shadow didn't move, didn't sleep, didn't blink. He watched the woods. Elsewhere, chaos bloomed. Back at the festival, Melissa was sprinting through mud, screaming her son's name. James arrived not long after, boots covered in dust, eyes already wild. "He's missing," Melissa choked. "He doesn't have his inhaler." The words hit like a blow. James's ranger instincts kicked in. He called in search teams. Sheriff. Parker organized volunteers. Flashlights, ATVs, bloodhounds, but no scent. No direction. The rain had already washed away the trail, and time was slipping. By nightfall, Shadow was still watching. Ethan drifted in and out of sleep. Each time his eyelids fluttered shut for too long, Shadow nudged him awake. Gently, persistently, he licked Ethan's face, shifted his body to share more warmth. Somewhere in the darkness, a fox rustled nearby. Shadow growled, a deep, low vibration that sent the creature fleeing. The boy didn't notice, but the dog did. He noticed everything, because this was his mission now, and failure wasn't an option. The storm had no mercy. It clawed through the pines like a living thing, ripping at branches, drenching earth, rattling the very roots of the forest. For those searching, it was a nightmare. For those hiding, it was worse. In the hollow beneath, the fallen oak shadow lay curved around the boy like a shield. His body trembled, not from fear but from sheer exertion. Every muscle ached. Hunger twisted through him like wire. His injured eye socket throbbed with dull heat. But he didn't move. He couldn't. Ethan was asleep, breath shallow but steady. The inhaler had bought them time, but the boy's skin was cold. His lips were turning pale, and the wind was biting. Shadow shifted closer. He knew this game, this slow theft of life called hypothermia. He had seen it in the mountains of Afghanistan, in soldiers caught too long in the high passes. He had watched it take men stronger than this boy, but he wouldn't let it take Ethan. Not tonight. In town, the search effort had become a machine. Maps were pinned to walls inside town hall. Volunteers were logged and dispatched. Rangers used walkie-talkies. Drones were grounded by the storm, but infrared cameras waited, humming in the trunks of emergency vehicles. Melissa refused to sit. She clutched Ethan's spare inhaler like a relic, pacing the same 5 feet over and over. James was everywhere, coordinating, predicting, guiding. Years of backcountry work were now laser-focused on finding one small pair of footprints in 1,000 square acres. Then came Agent Miller. Clean-cut, soft-spoken, too calm. "This is Agent Miller from the Department of Agriculture, Sheriff," Parker announced. Miller explained his presence quickly. He was tracking reports of a dangerous predator, possibly a wolf or a large feral dog. Recent livestock attacks, sightings. He said it all with the ease of someone used to being listened to. But James, standing off to the side, mud-splashed and bone-tired, felt something twist in his gut. Wolves hadn't been seen in these parts for decades, and Miller? He didn't smell like agriculture. Back in the forest, dawn crept in like a secret. Slow silvering of the sky. Shadow's ears twitched first, then his nose. Human sounds, boots, voices, barking dogs. Help was coming, but the question still haunted him. Could help be trusted? His time on the run had taught him too well that humans were not always kind. Some carried leashes, some carried pain, but Ethan needed more than warmth now. He needed medicine, shelter, food. Shadow made his decision. He nudged the boy awake. Ethan's eyes fluttered open, confused and weak. "Is it morning?" he whispered. Shadow looked toward the sounds, then back at the boy. With deliberate motion, he tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "Up," the gesture said. "Come." Ethan understood. Somehow, he wrapped trembling arms around the dog's thick neck. Shadow crouched, rose, carried him, step by painful step. The search team spotted them as they crested a ridge, a dark figure against gray light, a child on its back, a ghost of a dog. James was the first to react. He ran. "Ethan!" Melissa followed, barely breathing. When they reached him, they stopped cold because the dog, massive, scarred, one-eyed, was still watching. Not fleeing, not attacking, just standing, a sentinel, a soldier. Shadow set the boy down gently and stepped back. Melissa dropped to her knees, checking Ethan's vitals. James kept his eyes on the shepherd. "I know that stance," he whispered. "He's not just a stray." Then Ethan spoke, voice hoarse. "He saved me." And with those 3 words, the entire tone shifted, from threat to gratitude, from fear to awe. But not everyone was convinced. Agent Miller watched from a distance, lips tight. Later, when Shadow was taken to the veterinary clinic for emergency, Miller made a call. "Target acquired," he said into his satellite phone. "Proceeding with extraction plan. At the clinic, Dr. Sarah Thompson worked quickly. Shadow was malnourished, dehydrated but stable. His body told a story she had seen before. Fighting scars, collar wounds, healed fractures. And yet, when she scanned his chip, what came up wasn't just an ID number. It was a military designation. Shadow, the database read. Guardian Program, Multi-Purpose Canine, Special Forces. Sarah stared at the screen, and suddenly, everything made sense. At the Pinehurst Community Hospital, a child lay still beneath fluorescent lights, tangled in tubes and soft beeping monitors. Ethan was alive, but barely. His lungs were fighting, his fever rising. Doctors hovered, adjusting machines, calculating dosages, and at the edge of it all, silent, soaked, battered, sat a dog who refused to leave. Shadow. The staff tried. "We can't have an animal in here," one nurse whispered, but Shadow stayed planted beside the boy's bed, his one eye tracking every motion. When Ethan stirred in his fevered dreams, Shadow's ears twitched. When he whimpered, Shadow nosed his hand. When nurses moved too quickly, the dog stiffened, not aggressive but watchful. "You'll have to physically drag him out," James told them. No one volunteered. Melissa had never seen anything like it. Her son had never responded to anything. Not a pet, not a stuffed animal, not even comfort from her, like this. But with Shadow he was calm, focused, grounded. "He's anchoring him," Dr. Harrison admitted quietly. "I've seen therapy dogs work wonders, but this is different." Then came Agent Miller, again, this time with documents. "I have federal orders to seize the animal," he announced, producing a clipboard. "Classified asset, national security." Sarah stood in front of him before anyone else could react. "This dog just saved a child's life. He's military property." "He's not property," Melissa said, voice rising. "He's family now." Tension rippled through the room. Shadow felt it. He rose slowly, muscles taut, placing himself between Ethan and the approaching agent. James moved beside him. "You're not taking him." "I have jurisdiction." "No, you don't," came another voice, firm, commanding. Colonel David Weber stepped into the room, military insignia gleaming. His presence shifted everything. "Miller, you were instructed to observe, not act." Miller bristled. With respect. Weber interrupted. "This dog is not just any working canine. He's Guardian class. His training is still classified. He completes his mission, then he chooses his future." Shadow recognized Weber. He didn't remember names, but he remembered scent, voice, posture. He wagged his tail just once. Later. That day, Weber sat with Melissa and James in a quiet corner. He was part of a program designed to detect medical emergencies before they happen, he explained. Advanced training. Guardian dogs were meant to support medics on the battlefield. James whistled softly. "And now he's here, with my son." "Some bonds form faster than logic allows," Weber said. Melissa nodded. "I don't care how he got here, he's staying." Weber studied them. "Then you'll need to prove he's still functional, controlled, responsive." He paused. "If he passes, I'll recommend full retirement and family placement." Ethan's condition stabilized, but barely. When his breathing dipped again, alarms blared. Shadow leapt up. He pawed at the right side of Ethan's chest, whining urgently. Everyone froze. "Back the dog up," Dr. Harrison started. "Wait," Sarah interrupted. "These dogs are trained to detect internal issues." Harrison pressed a stethoscope to the exact spot. His face changed. Collapsed lung. "We missed it." Minutes later, with a drainage tube inserted, Ethan's vitals improved. No one questioned. Shadow after that. Then came the helicopter. Ethan needed to be airlifted to Denver Children's Hospital. "Critical care. No dogs in the chopper," the medic said. Melissa's heart broke. "He needs him." Shadow stood still, watching. But when Ethan began to cry, reaching for him, Shadow made a decision of his own. He walked forward, sat beside. The gurney didn't move, didn't blink. The medic wavered, then, okay, he goes. And so, in an unprecedented moment, a one-eyed military dog was lifted into the sky beside a child he refused to abandon. Back in Pinehurst, Agent Miller fumed. But by the time the helicopter disappeared over the treetops, he was already being investigated. Colonel Weber's connections ran deep. Orders were questioned, credentials verified. Papers revoked. Shadows passed. The theft, the fighting, the trauma surfaced. And suddenly the dog they once called property became a survivor, a soldier, a hero. At Denver Children's, Shadow was quiet, focused. He never left Ethan's side. Not during IV changes, not during rounds, not during the darkest hours. And when Ethan whispered in the night, "Don't leave," Shadow responded by staying. Always. Eventually, General Ramsey arrived. He reviewed the case, spoke with doctors, nurses, family. Then he made it official. Guardian 7, designation Shadow, is hereby granted honorable retirement. From the United States military. He turned to Melissa and James. "If you're willing, the dog is yours." Ethan, awake and smiling now, grinned. "I already knew that," he said. 6 months later, the snow came early. Pinehurst Valley lay quiet under a blanket of white, the kind that muffled every sound except the crunch of boots and the occasional bark in the distance. At the edge of town, in a modest home with cedar siding and a tire swing out back, Ethan Wilson was building a snowman. Shadow watched from the porch, tail thudding against the wood, his one eye soft. He no longer flinched at loud noises, no longer scanned the horizon for danger, no longer slept in doorways, half waiting for commands that would never come. He was home. Inside the house, photos lined the mantel. Ethan with a medal around his neck. Shadow beside him, tongue lolling, eyes bright. Another picture showed Ethan. In a hospital bed, Shadow curled beside him. The final photo was older. Shadow in uniform, standing proud with a handler now gone. It had taken time. There were moments when Ethan still woke in the middle of the night, wheezing or crying. But Shadow was always there first, pawing gently, curling close. Every time without fail. The bond between them wasn't just survival, it was something deeper. It was family. Melissa often found herself staring at Shadow when no one was looking, wondering what ghost still lived inside him, wondering how many lives he had carried, how many missions, how many nights like the one with Ethan. But he never looked back. He was always here. Now. James, too, had changed. He was back more often, staying for dinners, fixing shelves, laughing louder. The divorce papers sat unsigned in a drawer, forgotten. Sometimes healing starts in the smallest places, like a boy's laughter or a dog's silence. People came from other towns to hear the story. Some wanted to adopt military dogs. Others just wanted to meet the shepherd who had carried a child through a storm. They brought treats, letters, toys. But Shadow only cared about one thing: Ethan. Then, one evening in January, a letter arrived from Washington, stamped classified, eyes only. Melissa opened it with shaking hands. It was short, simple. Shadow's former unit has gone dark. 3 guardian dogs unaccounted for. Possible extraction needed. Further details to follow. Trust required. Mission pending. She looked at Shadow, who had already risen from his bed. Tail still, eyes alert. Something in him had shifted, like he knew. That night, Ethan clutched his fur. A little tighter. "Don't go," he whispered. And Shadow didn't. Not yet, but outside the wind had changed. And somewhere, far away, the next chapter had already begun.